Keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
What's going on? It is the GSMC Football Podcast on the GSMC Podcast Network. It's the duo that can do no wrong. It is Brice. It is Ethan. We're back again on a Tuesday to bring you all your football, not just NFL, football news, topics, and discussions. But you know how we started off. We always got to check in on our great co-host, man. Brice, how are you doing?
Ethan, it's always great doing another show with you, but I'm doing well, man. I'm doing well. Just the same old thing going on for the most part, man. Just going through every day, one day at a time, and just trying to live it as best we can during this time period in our lives. So, how that's going. But yeah, for the most part, I'm doing well, man. How about you? How are you?
I'm doing well. I was trying to get really creative yesterday. I was making a short film for myself just to do it because I haven't been able to really go out and shoot anything as far as like filmmaking for a while because, of course, COVID-19, not having a lot of people around to help. But I decided, you know what? I'm not going to let that stop me. I'm going to do my best, and I'm just going to make this little film that I wanted to make in the middle of the day because I had an idea in the shower to do something cool. So I think it's going to turn out cool. I've been working on the rough sketch, the rough edit. However, I definitely busted my behind yesterday in midst of trying to strive for art. And my knee cries this morning due to it. Hopefully, it'll be okay. But right now, we are trying to survive.
Yeah, I feel that, man. Like I said, man, I'm hoping speedy recovery, man. You get back to 100%, so you don't have to worry about the knee anymore, man. The knee problems can be lingering, but hopefully you can get back to where you were, man. And maybe, I don't know. Were you able to finish your short film?
Yeah, I was able to finish it. I think due to adrenaline and shock, the pain didn't come in until later on during the day when I just started sitting down and not move around. But as the day went on, it definitely just started to tack on. But, yeah, I'm going to have to take today as a rest day for sure.
Understandable.
All right. Well, enough about knee injuries that don't relate to football. We have a lot of things going on in the football atmosphere, the football world, the football universe that needs to be discussed. And that's why we're here today at the GSMC. First, we got a lot of news to cover, so buckle up. We're going for a ride. Opting out, Brice. The NFL is thinking about letting players opt out of the season due to COVID-19. What can you tell us about that?
So basically the NFL and the NFLPA are discussing a deadline, a date, where players can decide if they're going to play the season or not. Because obviously, if you see every other sports league, they've given their players a chance to not have to play because obviously you never know what conditions the players could be under, if their family members have underlying conditions or they have newborns or they're just in a situation where they cannot allow themselves to be exposed through the sport that they play to COVID-19. Obviously, some people are just in fear of their own health, just not wanting to get it. So they're trying to work on a date. We don't know when the date is. They don't have a range. If I was them, I would assume maybe late August, right before the regular season, maybe potentially, because they may let it be a period where it's like you can kind of, especially if they have preseason games still, they can allow the players to kind of see what the protocols are going to look like a little bit. And then if players are uncomfortable with it, or they just feel like this isn't worth it and they have the ability to sit out. Now, obviously, I feel like the NFL is in a different position than other leagues because, for the most part, I would say in the NFL, it's a 53-man roster. So I'm sure when they make this date, they're also going to make protocol for, okay, so if you have a player who drops off, then you obviously need to replace him. And I'm sure they're going to still have a 53-man roster. They might increase the size of the roster. We don't know. But basically, I think this is a good step moving forward to allow players to potentially, not have to play if they want to. Because I've mentioned before, when we talked about this before, even that some players may be not comfortable playing in this environment. Like a lot of players, you've seen many players in baseball opt out. You've seen, obviously, we know about some basketball players who decide not to come. Obviously, we know about some soccer teams here in America that just basically didn't play and did not join the MLS comeback. So clearly, it would make sense for the NFL to give players the ability to not have to play in those conditions if they do not want to play, especially in front of no crowd, especially if they have no fans and just, maybe your city or your area is more COVID infected than others. So maybe you're just like, I'm not really feeling it. So it really just depends on everybody's particular situation. And it might be pretty big if you see maybe some big time players even opt out of playing in the season. So we'll have to see. But yeah, so Ethan, like, what are your thoughts on it? Are you like kind of happy? Like, okay, yeah, they should give the players an opt out. And do you think we might see any potential major players say, you know what, I'm just not going to play this season? Because you already have a couple of players who are holding out for money, but they could also use COVID as another excuse to not play as well.
I think that giving them the option is always the best way to go about this. If you didn't give them the option, then everybody would complain that they didn't have an option to opt out when this COVID thing actually really, really decides to strike fire. And I would say that a lot of players probably have to consider it, but I also think that most players will choose to play than not. And it's because there is incentive to play. There's incentive to make money. Most NFL contracts are not guaranteed and definitely not fully guaranteed. So you're going to want to play to make your money, because if you play, the NFL makes money and everybody else makes money because of that. So even if you are in a contract holdout, right? And this is probably the worst timing ever to be in a contract holdout, because if you sit out, you save a year off of you playing, but that means you're another year older, and depending on your position, that could be really, really bad for you. And you don't get to showcase your market value for one season. And if you weren't that great to begin with, then you're putting a lot of risk that they don't find somebody like a diamond in the rough, or they don't decide, like if there's a running back and they go running back by committee and it shows that it was more valuable than just giving you the ball the whole time, or even if you're like a defensive end or something like that, and they feel like you may be talented, but you're not worth paying a lot of money to, considering that they don't know where the cap is going to be in a few years. I think a lot of players are probably going to take the tag now, because there's no roadmap to what the salary cap is going to look like. There's no roadmap to see how money works in the NFL for the next few years. So it's going to force a lot of players' hands to either say, they're going to stick by their guns and hold out for more money and more guarantees, even though franchise tags technically are fully guaranteed money for 1 year, if I remember correctly.
Yes, fully guaranteed for 1 year.
Right. So I think even just that alone means that it's more likely that people start signing tags rather than you'll see them fight for more money for a longer deal. Because even though security on a longer deal matters and you should fight for it, but at the same time, you kind of have to get it how you live right now. And to get something fully guaranteed, like during a pandemic, is probably the best option, in my opinion. but we'll just have to see on that.
Yeah, definitely. And I also think, it's funny because when the Patrick Mahomes got his deal, obviously we know about his, I believe it was $140, $150 million injury settlement in his contract. And you might, during this period of time, you might see players saying, hey, like, if we do play, maybe we should have insurance. Like the NBA gave their players insurance. We should get insurance or something like that. If we did get COVID or something happens, especially like you said, these contracts aren't fully guaranteed sometimes. Or if maybe somebody does sign a deal, they're just like, hey, can you put an injury settlement in my contract? Just in case, because you never know if that one player has COVID and then they have long-term effects where it keeps them from playing. Obviously, they don't want their money and everything to stop coming in just because of that particular thing. So you could also see that potentially being something that could be in the works potentially, because obviously you want to make sure that at all times you can be protected for potentially going out there and risking your potential, I guess, career, you could say. And like the other report, obviously in Kansas City, I believe it was, I want to say it was Chris Jones, I believe. The star defensive tackle. I don't know if I'm getting his name wrong.
Yeah, I believe it's Chris Jones. That's
and he's holding out right now because he wants to get paid, and he's threatening to sit out the entire season. And that's why I had brought up earlier to you, like, hey, he could save money, but he also could use COVID and be like, hey, if I'm going to risk my potential health playing for you guys, I want to make sure I'm paid to play for you guys, So that's something that also has to kind of, linger around. Obviously, we know other potential holdouts like Dalvin Cook and et cetera. Now, we don't know if it's going to go into the season, but, maybe, and that could also be a reason, like you said, how some players are going to try to take the guaranteed money. That could be potentially why Dak went ahead and signed the franchise tender. Because he knew, listen, we're in a season of COVID. Yeah, I want the Dallas Cowboys to pay me, but depending on what happens, I might need to keep this $31 million on hand just in case. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see how it all kind of works out. Because like I said, the NFL and NFLPA are now having a lot of discussions about what's going to happen since their season is rapidly coming.
Yeah, the NFL is no longer the last chip to fall here as far as waiting to see what they're going to do. Like, let's keep this in mind. The NFL hasn't had to make a really crucial decision on the season really since the draft. Like, the draft, of course, they couldn't do anything, and they pulled it off with, like, whatever they could do, and they did a really excellent job with the draft. Kudos to the NFL. But now, since the draft, they haven't really had to have a real plan in place on how they're going to deal with COVID-19 as far as if they're going to delay the season or not. And to say that they had a plan, of course. They have contingencies. They were cleaning facilities, and they were trying to bring people back and see what the landscape was like. But considering they've had all this time, it may have even backfired on them to have this much time to scope out the landscape, so to speak, because COVID cases have been rising rapidly over the last few weeks, and it's getting closer and closer to when people are supposed to be coming for training camp and when facilities are supposed to be back open and people are supposed to be coming back to work. And the timeline is not matching for the NFL to find a easy solution to this, because it's not like they're building a bubble system for the NFL. They're still planning on traveling to games. Of course, there's no way they can just do in-conference, right? There's no way they can do in-division games like the NCAA is looking like they're going to be doing. It is going to be extremely difficult to maneuver this whole operation, this whole season, without some sort of fear that a large amount of your players will be potentially exposed to COVID-19. And the players, what makes you money? The stars, like, if the stars start contracting COVID-19, it is going to be problems. It is going to be a nightmare in the news cycle, and you don't want to see the NFL have to shut down abruptly in the middle of the season, but I don't see how in the world we're going to get an NFL season that doesn't have some sort of scrutiny to it And I'm honestly really concerned to see, since they're planning to do no preseason games, or they're fighting for no preseason games, I'm very concerned to see if they do play preseason games, what the first game will look like. And imagine if the first preseason game, there's already issues and people are saying, well, doing preseason, we might as well just stop it now, so that way we don't have to get into the regular season and potentially, lose all forward momentum that we could have and then find a way to push it and delay it. But the thing about delaying is you don't know how long a delay is when you don't have a vaccine. It's not like there's a timetable on when the vaccine is coming. So you're just delaying for hope, and there's no real solid plan. But we're going to take our first break, and then we're going to come back, talk a little bit more COVID, and talk some Washington professional football team.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, we're back with the GSMC Football Podcast. And I would like to take this opportunity to encourage everyone to go follow our social media, our Facebook and our Twitter at GSMC Football. Ask us questions, send us some stuff that you're interested in. Tell us how we're doing and tell us if you enjoy the show or not. It'd be great to interact with us because we are always trying to better ourselves. And also we like to talk to everybody. So don't forget to follow our social media. Brice, are you aware of COVID-19?
Yes, I think I am very, very much aware, Ethan, of COVID-19.
All right. Were you aware that the Cardinals owner, Michael Bidwell, was hospitalized for COVID-19?
I was actually not aware of that till literally I saw that he got out of the hospital for COVID-19.
Exactly. I did not know. Amidst all this other news, I was not aware that the owner was hospitalized. So Arizona Cardinals owner Michael Bidwell was released from the hospital 2 days after he was announced he was tested positive for COVID-19. The team confirmed on Sunday. The team announced Friday that the 55-year-old chairman received a diagnosis after recently spending a few weeks traveling on the East Coast. He was submitted to Rhode Island Hospital sometime afterward. He said that this week, I learned firsthand just how serious COVID-19 is. Bidwell said in a statement released to the team, my immense appreciation for all of those on the front lines of this pandemic has only increased, and I am particularly grateful to the tremendous nurses and doctors at Newport, Rhode Island Hospital. I am also overwhelmed by the outpouring of kindness from the Red Sea, as well as so many friends and colleagues in Arizona and throughout the country. I'm very fortunate to have this experience behind me and strongly encourage everyone to continue practicing the important measures to avoid it themselves. Bidwell is the first NFL owner publicly known to have contracted the novel coronavirus. Brice, I gotta say, I haven't even thought about the fact that a lot of these owners have not really spoken about COVID-19 outside of just team statements. And as far as how they are doing themselves, a lot of owners are old, right? Jerry Jones is not a spring chicken. Where is Jerry Jones going to be? Is he going to be on the sidelines? I don't think so. Is he going to be in that press box by himself? Because there's going to be no fans in the stands, right? So I guess he can be in the press box with his family, but I don't know. It's getting kind of funky, right? But first of all, I didn't know Bidwell was 55 years old. He's pretty young to be an owner, to be completely honest.
Yeah, most owners we know are like, usually 65 plus, you could say?
Maybe even older than that. But to be honest, I don't really know that many owners. If I know an owner, it's probably because he or she has been around for a long time, right? So you can only assume that they're getting kind of old. Like, especially for the NFL, I always think that for the NBA, rather, there's a little bit of a young owner, young GM sort of thing going on. Cleveland, signed a GM who is, I think, in his 30s still. He's not very old. Not Cleveland Cavaliers, but, Cleveland Browns recently.
Oh, yeah, Andrew Berry, yes.
So I guess there is a little bit of youth in the NFL front office ranks and the ownership ranks a little bit. So that's interesting. Glad to hear that he ended up doing all right and he's back home. But it does show how serious COVID-19 really is. You got to take it serious, people. As we know, Arizona is in a really, really bad spot with cases. And the previous idea was that the heat would essentially kill the virus. That is not the case. Arizona is one of the hottest places in the United States. On average, I believe yesterday in the state, it was 114 degrees. Unreal, right? I can't even imagine. If I saw that on a temperature gauge and I'm outside, I'm just laying on the ground. I'm just not moving. I'm done.
It's funny because they said, I think, I don't know if you ever on your social media timelines ever saw that one, I believe it was a tweet about, I think, if we get to like 130 degrees, that would kind of kill the virus. They were only 16 degrees away. If it just moved up just a little bit, man, it could have been cured out there in Arizona.
I mean, that in itself is just, can we even survive at 130 degrees? I don't even know.
You just have to have a lot of air conditioning and a lot of water.
Oh, man. I don't know. I wouldn't even step outside. I'd be so fearful. But
AC at full blast.
Yeah, man. Moving on from one red team to a team that could potentially change its color scheme while it changes its whole new identity, right? So Washington professional sports in the NFL has changed the whole nine. So they are retiring the nickname of the Redskins and the logo as well. And the new nickname is to be determined. So Dan Snyder's team will no longer be referred as the Washington Redskins. The team announced Monday that it will be retiring the team nickname and the logo. And today we're announcing that we'll be retiring the Redskins name and logo upon completion of this review. The team said in a statement, Dan Snyder and Coach Ron Rivera are working closely to develop a new name and design approach that will enhance the standing working closing to development, the new name and design approach, and the tradition-rich franchise and inspire our sponsors, fans, and community for the next 100 years. So first of all, before I continue, how much does the coach really have a say in this whole thing? Is it just to put his name out there? Does Dan Snyder really like Ron Rivera this much to where he's like, hey Ron, what do you think we should change the name to? He just got there.
I mean, yeah, but I mean, hey, he hired him. He said, obviously GM hired him too, but Dan Snyder's like, we like you. I mean, and honestly, it would make sense. You should give him the ability to change the name. I believe Ron has some, I don't know if I'm incorrect in saying this, but I want to say he has some type of native descent in his history of his bloodline. So, I mean, obviously it would then make more sense to talk to him about it as well. But also it should be like a group decision, you know what I'm saying? Because you don't want to just leave it in Dan Snyder's hands. And obviously, you got to have a group of people you talk to. Yeah, you can hire some outside people, but I'm sure they like to just keep it in-house. Ron Rivera is a very respected man. I'm sure a lot of people would love to have his opinion on a lot of different things because he has that type of demeanor about himself as well. But Ethan, did you hear about that one issue they could run into?
What's that issue?
apparently there's a retailer in Alexandria that trademarked pretty much every possible new NFL nickname the Redskins could have. They've trademarked about 14 to 20 names potentially. All the names that we were talking about, he basically trademarked all of them. So now they can't use any of those names, or they have to go into a legal battle with him over that name if they want to use it for a new franchise. So you might have to see them do something that either doesn't make sense, or they're going to come up with something out of the blue, because about 20 to 25 nicknames have been taken off the table because somebody's already trademarked all those Washington names, because it's the Washington, then whatever name insert here. So it's not just the name, it's Washington, et cetera, like Washington Monument, et cetera, et cetera. So hopefully maybe they can find a way around it and still find something that I guess fits what they want to be maybe in the future, or just fits the type of franchise they want to be, since they have a limited amount of options for names.
But wouldn't the only point of buying all these trademarks so that Washington wouldn't be able to have them is so that they have to buy the trademark from him?
Potentially, and that's smart. He can make some money now. They'll probably give him a solid few million. I don't know, maybe 10, 20, 50. I don't know. It depends on how badly they want that name. Depends on how much he's willing to give it up for.
That's what I'm saying. Like, if he's trademarked 20-something names, he's definitely come out of pocket quite a bit. Like, getting a trademark for something is not inexpensive in the least, right? You do have to, and it's a process. So he's done it 20-some times. That's insane. So clearly he has the money to do it, but I'm sure he's trying to turn a profit on all this, because imagine if they don't use the name and he's just been sitting on this basically for nothing, right? For absolutely nothing. And he only did this because he knew that at some point Washington would be forced to change their name in some degree or fashion. So this is his time to shine. That's what he's saying. So he's probably about to pull up to FedEx Field and be like, hey, I got these 20 names. As he showcases his overcoat, he's got 20 different names listed on the overcoat. Which one you want? I got the trademarks ready. Let's do business. I just have to assume that's what's going to happen here if they really enjoy a name that they can't particularly own themselves without buying the trademark.
Yeah, and so, hey, like I said, it's a smart move. It is a smart move, because the thing about the filing date is that he filed this very recently as well. So it isn't like this was years ago. So he obviously, oh yeah, they're about to change their date. Let me go ahead and get these already trademarked. So that way, if they really want it, they have to go through me. So I guess maybe it's a tip. You never know. Maybe another team wanted to change their name potentially in a professional sport, and you're just kind of like, well, let me just take some recommendations off the table. And if they really want to go with that name, they have to go through me to get it. So, you know.
Wow. So, like, if you live in Cleveland, for example, you know, the Cleveland Indians may be next on the chopping block as far as name changes. Some people will think that even the Atlanta Braves may have some potential name change stuff coming. But honestly, yeah. I feel like the Atlanta Braves would be more of just the imagery of the tomahawk rather than the actual name, the Braves.
Yeah, and they said that honestly they might just do something with the chop that they do at the games instead of the actual name itself. So taking away that might work and suffice well. So, you know, obviously you can see Washington. It would definitely be interesting, I think, Ethan, to see what name they come up with and what they think works for them, basically. What they think, whatever they can think of, I would say.
Hmm. Well, the team announced July 3rd it will undergo a thorough review of the team's name, and Monday's announcement was an effort to keep sponsors, fans, and community apprised of thinking as we go forward. And the big underlining point in that sentence is sponsors. The money.
With that sponsor money.
They had to keep the money going. The organization had been known as the Redskins since 1933. So former owner George Preston Marshall moved to the team from Boston to D.C. in 1937. On July 2nd, a group of 87 investment firms and shareholders signed 3 separate letters to Nike, FedEx, PepsiCo threatening to terminate relationships with the team unless it dropped the racially insensitive name. And later that day, FedEx, the company with naming the rights to the team stadium, formally requested the franchise to take action, and the review began on that day. The team will still continue to deal with legal and other issues as it works to establishing a new team name before the start of the 2020 NFL season. You got to admit it. This is probably the most exciting news that a Washington football fan has had since the days of getting RG3 in the first overall pick, right? I'd have to assume. What good has Washington really had since then?
I mean, they did have that one playoff season with Kirk Cousins, but outside of that, not really a bunch of nothing.
So, yeah, this is excitement. If it was my team, right, the Saints have plenty of other reasons why some things might be coming down the pipeline for them as potentially needing to change ownership and things like that. There's a lot of underground stuff going on in the NFL or being covered up by that organization that I feel may come to light soon if they actually wanted to report on it more. For example, there's a whole little scandal that I don't know if you heard about the archdiocese and the church. And
the emails.
Yeah, covering up the emails. So we still don't really know exactly how that's going. But if it gets worse, the Saints may have to relocate or get a new owner at the very least. And that is also something that I have to think about. But we are going to take another break, and we're going to come out talking about some free agency news. Well, it's not really free agency, but agency news and movement, trading topics, transactions. We're coming up. GSMC.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Okay, we're back, GSMC Football Nation, and we are going to be talking about Brice's favorite guy, favorite man on the planet. The Falcons let him go, and it was kind of a weird divorce, to be honest. I don't think anybody really thought that Devonta Freeman was a done running back in this league, but he definitely was done with the Falcons, according to Thomas Dimitroff and, of course, Arthur Blank, because he didn't come back. So Devonta Freeman's agent now is saying he's done, as Devonta Freeman's agent severs ties with the free agent running back. Devonta Freeman's already uncertain NFL future hit another snag Sunday night, as NFL Network's Mike Silver reported that Freeman's agent Christian Campbell notified the free agent running back that she's terminating their relationship. Campbell notably negotiated the 5-year, $41.25 million extension he signed with the Falcons in 2017 that made him the highest paid running back in the game. Freeman is still 28, and he still remains a notable name on the free agent market nearly 4 months after being released by Atlanta. And a deal with the Seahawks in late May appeared imminent, but talks fell through at the last minute, leading to the Seahawks' decision to sign Carlos Hyde. Silver noted that at the time that Freeman believed he was worth more than a 1-year offer that was on the table. He was set to make $4 million on that deal. Silver also reported shortly after the end of those talks that the 6-year veteran insisted he's still open to sitting out the next season if his contract number isn't met. The Buccaneers briefly expressed interest in June, prompting Freeman to tell the team via Twitter that they could reach out to him directly. Of course, nothing materialized from that exchange. And with some teams still looking to add depth ahead of training camp, which is set to commence in a few short weeks, it'll be interesting to see how things play out for Freeman now that he is without representation. So, Brice, I ask you, as a former fan of Devonta Freeman, you still could be a fan, but he's definitely not a part of your team anymore. How do you feel all of this is coming together for him?
I mean, this is something that you see happen sometimes with players and agents. When, a player hits the market and they're not getting signed, sometimes they feel like maybe it's my agent that's keeping me from getting a deal or something like that. Maybe the reason why he turned down other deals because his agent told him to turn it down. So you see it all the time sometimes when you see players want new contracts and it's taking forever, or they're trying to get a new job, a new team, and it takes forever. You'll see players, cut ties with the agent, and it's something that's going to be interesting. I don't remember. I want to say, I forgot who it was, but there was, I don't know if it was Ndamukong Suh. I don't know if it was Albert Haynesworth. I don't know who it was, but there was one player, I don't know if you remember, Ethan, who never had an agent. So when he signed a deal, he would be the one to read through everything and negotiate his own deal and everything like that. And it was just interesting because obviously, everybody has an agent to do that. Where it was interesting how he actually took the time out to sit here and be like, well, I'm going to help negotiate my own deal and et cetera. But, I mean, we don't know right now how soon Devonta Freeman is going to get an agent. I'm sure he has agents who are willing to be his agent because, I mean, listen, he's like I said, he's 28, still young. I think Devonta can still play. He can still be an effective running back for a team. Like, honestly, it honestly depends on what role you need him in. I mean, because Devonta Freeman showed he can run the ball, but he's also a good pass catcher out of the backfield. He's a very elusive in the open field. So it really is just one of those things where it depends on who might just need a different change of pace back, I would say. And, like I said, I'm sure when he gets himself a new agent, I'm sure his new agent's going to do what he can to try to get him the money that he wants or close to, but also maybe try to get him to a destination that he may prefer to want to go as well. And, obviously with the running back market kind of, like I said, kind of going through a dry spell, everybody kind of has for the most part, their running backs, even though, obviously we heard about Raheem Mostert wanting a trade from the 49ers. Maybe that's a spot he could go to.
Because if you remember, thinking about that, yeah.
Because if Devonta Freeman played with Kyle Shanahan, had his best year under Kyle Shanahan, that's why he got the deal in the first place. So maybe that's a potential reunion potentially for them, where he could go to San Francisco and then he could flourish in that Kyle Shanahan offense like he did in Atlanta. And that is a move that would be very, I would think, interesting and from my point of view.
Yeah.
What are you thinking about Devonta Freeman? Huh? You think he'll be able to find a job?
I think he'll find a job that he wants to, right? So he wants to have multiple years on his deal, and I don't think he understands just what position he's in. Let's keep in mind that Raheem Mostert is the same age as him, and he was a more hot commodity near the end of the season than Devonta Freeman was. And he's not even being sought after like that. He wants to change his deal. He wants to be paid like a running back. And San Francisco is like, nah, you all right. You can stay where you are. And now he's asking for a trade. I don't know where he's going to get traded to, but it is an interesting thought process that he gets to, like, if they do trade Mostert and they get, I don't know, a 6th-round pick, a 5th-rounder out of it, and, they have some cap, they could go sign him for a 1-year deal if he decides to say, you know what, I don't have to have the multi-years. I'll go try and play for a championship contender for 1 year and try to make a name for myself again back on the market next year. And I get to go play with Tevin Coleman again. And I'm in a system that is heavily predicated on running back success, even though their running back room is a little bit crowded right now with having Tevin Coleman. And they have Jarrett McKinnon back from injury. So there's a little bit less room to be successful in the running back route idea, like the identity. But, Devonta Freeman has a set of skills that I don't think Tevin Coleman and Jared McKinnon really have. He's a really, really good pass catcher out the backfield. He's shifty still. And in open space, I still think he's one of the better backs in the league at trying to make people miss. He just hasn't been healthy all the time. So that might be another cause for concern why people don't want to give him a multi-year deal, because if he's not healthy, then you're kind of just sitting on money, as what the Falcons kind of did for 2 years after he signed the deal. So I can see why people are kind of hesitant on going after Freeman, especially not giving him a multi-year deal or anything like that. Let's keep in mind the hottest, I guess, free agent on the list before 2 weeks ago was Cam Newton, and he signed a 1-year deal that, to be honest, seems a little bit cheap comparative to what we thought he would be able to get when he first was a free agent. Would I be wrong in saying that?
Yeah, I would think that's a pretty accurate statement.
So I have to assume that Devonta Freeman has to see the writing on the wall. It's the same thing with Jadeveon Clowney. I don't know what Jadeveon Clowney's deal is going to be. I think Seattle still has money available to try and convince him to come back, but I don't know where Jadeveon is thinking of going. But I have to assume it's not going to be a multi-year deal anymore because of the climate that we're currently in.
Yeah, definitely. And, with all these deals and all these players are still on the market, because there's still some good free agents still out there on the market right now. It's not like this. It's not like free agency is dried up and there's no talent. It's just teams like to sometimes see what they have. And I think that's what makes this COVID situation kind of make it even more complicated for them. Because usually by now you could go through OTAs and mini camps and everything, and you could kind of see, okay, this is what it's looking like. We might need to think about upgrading this position. Okay, let's look into free agency, bring someone in. Literally, you have not worked with any of your players, so you don't know who's in good shape, who can play, where do you need to improve, where do you need work, any of that. You won't know literally till training camp. And then, you're just feeling like, okay, we already got a training camp roster. Do I just cut a guy because we need to bring in another guy? Or what do we do? Do we wait till after training camp? Maybe he'll stay in the preseason to make those adjustments. I mean, it's one of those things that is going to be very interesting to see, to me, how they do it. Remember, think about all the rookies. These rookies have not worked with any of their coaches outside of the virtual workouts. They have not worked with them in person. And you never know if that could hinder them. And so you're like, okay, we might need to bring someone in. I mean, there's plenty, like I said, notable free agents out there. It's just a matter of really just figuring out, okay, if an injury happens, we know to pick someone up. If maybe there's a position that we're seeing in camp that's not playing well, we need to pick someone up. And really just go from there if you're an NFL team for the most part.
Right. So speaking of movements, transactions, we have to talk about the biggest one that's been in the NFL news cycle for the last couple of weeks, and that is the Jamal Adams trade request. Le'Veon Bell lays in on his idea of how that is going. He says he thinks that he wants to be with the Jets, as in Jamal Adams, and he thinks he just wants to get paid. Bell said during an interview on Friday with Hot 97 in New York per ESPN, I think he's in the same situation I was in 3 years ago. He's a young player. He's been the top of the game. He's playing at a high level and feels like, dang, I just want to get compensated. Of course, the situation Bell's referring to was his well-documented 2018 dispute with his former employer in Pittsburgh, and after the franchise tag placed on him for a second straight year, Bell, one of the league's best running backs at the time, refused to sign a tender, believing it undermined his talents. To his credit, Bell was a multi-time All-Pro Bowl selection by the end of his age 25 season in 2017. It was worth noting, though, that the apprehension to sign him long-term could have come from a few nagging injuries he had to deal with during his time there. Nevertheless, Bell's holdout lasted from March to the late fall, when he did not sign the tag by November 13th, and he already missed 9 games, and his decision cost him the rest of the 2018 season, effectively ending his 5-year run with the Steelers. he signed a lucrative deal with New York as a free agent following March. So, despite the parallels he sees in Adams' issue with the Jets, he thinks and hopes that the team will hold on to the disgruntled defensive back. He says, me personally, I hope he doesn't get traded, but I don't think he'll get traded. I do think he'll be playing with the Jets. That's just me personally. I don't think he's going to get traded. Honestly, why would you trade him? I wouldn't trade him. So clearly Le'Veon wants his boy back, and he just wants him to see him get his money and the Jets to find a way to keep him around, because if they trade Jamal Adams away, what more do the Jets really have? Because they don't have a lot going for him right now.
Yeah, definitely. And, I mean, you could arguably make a statement he's the best player they have on the roster. So.
Oh, yeah, no question. He's the best player they have on the roster.
Yeah, so it wouldn't make sense. Joe Douglas, the GM, keeps saying they want to sign him. But then it's just like, okay, but are you really trying to sign him? Because look at this. We don't need another Dak situation where Jerry Jones saying, we going to sign him, he's going to get signed, and we're still waiting for him to get signed. You need to make up and give him the money, or you need to let him go. And I think, listen, the Jets are not in a position as an organization to be making demands, because, listen, not a lot of people want to play for you anyway because of the success of your franchise and dysfunction. You don't want to make players disgruntled, because I'm sure Jamal Adams is talking to a lot of other players in this league talking about, hey, do not come here. And let's not forget also, Adam Gase is playing a very big part in this, because Adam Gase is not liked by a lot of star players. Jamal Adams has said he does not like him, and that's one of the reasons why he wants to be traded. Like, we all know about his relationship with Le'Veon Bell. In Miami, Adam Gase did not get along with Jarvis Landry and some of the stars there. So Gase could be one of the reasons why the Jets are going through what they're going through right now as well.
Yeah, I don't know what the whole thing about Adam Gase is, man. I think eventually something's going to come out. Someone's going to talk. Right now, it hasn't been documented much on what exactly why players don't get along with him, or why he doesn't get along with some of these star players. But it seems to be his MO that star players do not particularly like Adam Gase at all. And it's showing its ugly head again. That before it was Le'Veon, he said that he didn't even want Le'Veon there in a press conference. And now it's Jamal Adams is trying to find his way out, and he's just one of the many reasons why he may want to go. Not just not getting paid, but because he doesn't want to play under Adam Gase either. But we're going to take another break here, and we're going to come back talking about the Pac-12, the Big Ten, canceling non-conference games, and we're going to get a little bit into get a little bit into some more deadlines as far as franchise tags. It's GSMC.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts. Past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Okay, GSMC Football Nation, we are back. It's me and Brice again, and we're going to start off the last 7 minutes talking about deadlines, as there's short time remaining for long-term contracts. So the deadline for franchise tag players to work out long-term deals is now less than a week away, as Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time draws near. That is the deadline for any club that has designated a franchise player to sign said player to a multi-year contract. Following Wednesday, a tag player cannot sign an extension until after the final game of the upcoming regular season. And thus far, of the 14 players tagged, 10 have signed their tenders and none have agreed to long-term contracts. So with the economic uncertainty due to the unpredictable future amid the COVID-19 pandemic, NFL insider Ian Rappaport reported Friday that it appears as if several will be playing on their one-year deals, including Tampa Bay edge Shaq Barrett, Washington guard Brandon Sheriff, and Jacksonville pass rusher Yannick Njoku. So those who are remaining to sign their tags are Njoku, Denver safety Justin Simmons, Cincinnati wide receiver A.J. Green, and Chiefs defensive lineman Chris Jones, who we talked about earlier. So the players who have signed their franchise tenure is Dak Prescott, of course, for $31 million. Tennessee's Derrick Henry for $10 million. Hunter Henry signed for $10.6. Joe Thuney in New England signed $14.8 for his franchise tenure. Washington Brandon Sheriff signed for $15 million. Leonard Williams signed for $16 million in New York. Baltimore's Matthew Judon signed for $16.8. Pittsburgh Buzz Dupree signed for $15.8, and Minnesota's Anthony Harris signed for $11.4. So, of the franchise 14, each of them had their own story, but as a whole, few seem destined for long-term signings. Many seem to have some contention with the tag, and at least two are filing grievances regarding the positions that they were designated at. So, Barrett signed his tender on Friday, but likewise filed a grievance as he believes he should be designated as a defensive end rather than a linebacker. Steelers standout Bud Dupree inked his tender back in April 23rd, but followed Barrett's lead in grievance as he looks as a defensive end share compared to a linebacker's, and linebackers projected 2020 salary stands at $15.8 million, while defensive ends command $17.8 million. It's a situation Baltimore's Matthew Judon navigated with the Ravens, making a contractual compromise at $16.8 per Ian Rappaport. So that's all that we have on tenders, and we won't know until about a week or so what all this is going to work out and shake out to. But what do you think is going to happen with some of these deals? Do you think some of these guys are going to get long-term deals?
Well, I mean, I always think when you get close to these deadlines, obviously teams and the players want to get these deals done. And I think you'll have maybe about one or two this year that probably could be worked out. We don't know who, but I feel like, there's teams that are currently talking to their agents right now. They're discussing some language. You never know. You could have a team that already has the numbers set. They're just trying to get the language hashed out. I mean, and they'll sign the dotted line when it gets closer to that deadline. Obviously, once the deadline passes, you can't sign a long-term extension until after the season, I believe. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see. Obviously, you talked about the grievances. In general, I think they may need to overhaul that entire system and have I would call it an edge player. So regardless if you're a defensive end or an outside linebacker in a 3-4, you should be just considered an edge and what edge players make, instead of trying to define it as a linebacker or a defensive end. It's kind of like it's not the same, but it is kind of like back with y'all when Jimmy Graham was trying to classify himself as a wide receiver than a tight end, because he would obviously get more money as a wide receiver. So, obviously, when you have those very versatile players, they're going to always want to be classified as the position that gets paid the most. And then sometimes, the teams are going to want to classify you as the position who gets paid the less. So, we'll have to see with those. But I think ultimately overall, you might see about one or two deals probably get done around that time. And it probably won't be anything big. Honestly, I don't believe that Dak and the Cowboys will reach a deal. So I don't think it'll be that one. But we'll see who it is. Maybe Derrick Henry and the Titans, but we don't know. They might just keep him on the franchise tag. We'll just have to keep an eye out.
All right. Well, are you been keeping up with college news, man? Because, I do the college football podcast, so I have no choice but to keep up. But how are you on the college front? Have you been paying attention what the biggest news in football universe is going on?
Yeah, man, I've been paying attention. I know that Pac-12 Big Ten agreed to go to an all-conference schedule. Am I right?
Yeah, so they are no longer playing non-conference games, and that affects so many different parts of the FBS. And it's very likely that more conferences will follow the same ideology and the same thought process. Like the ACC is probably going to do it. The SEC said that they are going to make an announcement at some point in the upcoming week, but they haven't explicitly said that they are going to follow playing non-conference or not to play their non-conference games. But as we've already seen, right, the Big 12 basically isn't going to get some of their games. We already have a few marquee games already known that's not going to happen. So USC won't play Alabama, right? We won't get Notre Dame versus Stanford or I believe USC. You know, Ohio State doesn't get to play their big non-conference games against Oregon, I believe they play. There's just so many games that non-conferences make so much money from. So not just think about the smaller schools, right? The schools that basically do buy-in games to make money from the bigger schools, so that way they can keep their budgets afloat and basically survive the next year. And they do a lot of buy-in games. So, for example, Tulane used to do a lot of buy-in games, but this year they did not, and they're in a position where they don't have to worry about playing non-conference games because they don't have any on their schedule this year. But a lot of their contemporaries at their level have a lot of buy-in games or had a lot of buy-in games that now are probably in jeopardy of not happening. And it's just another, you know, scratching the whole lining of this whole college football season. There's just so much uncertainty, and the dominoes just keep falling. So the Pac-12, who aren't the biggest money makers in the Power Five, of course, said they're not playing any non-conference games because if you look at the state of California, if you look at the state on the West Coast, things are not going well, and it makes a lot of sense. As you know, about a few weeks ago, after a month of saying that they're going to have a regular fall semester, so to speak, and they're going to bring students back, a lot of California institutions said that they are not going to bring students back and they're going to go strictly to online in the fall. And that already has its own issues, because how can you possibly bring football players back who are student athletes, apparently, but not bring back the students? So then it brings that up, that whole debate again. If you are going to make student athletes, particularly football players, come back to campus to play a sport, that's the only reason why they're coming back. It's not because you don't treat any other student like this, right? You are bringing these football players back. The NCAA has no longer an argument to make saying that, you know, they're student first, athlete second, because you're bringing them back only to make money and to make as much money as possible before this thing goes off the rails, and trying to salvage 1 year of your institutions losing out, right? So if you depend on these players so much to where some universities are trying to make them sign waivers, or what do they call it? Creeds? Not creeds, but
like I don't know what it's called. It's like these contracts basically
pledges.
Says they're not they're not liable if something happens.
Right. If you're trying to make kids who don't get any money from this to sign pledges and basically waivers so that the university isn't liable for them getting COVID-19 to play, something isn't right here. Like, this doesn't make any sense for athletes to not get compensated. And this is why they're fighting for name, image, and likeness. But at this point, it might need to be more than that, because you are essentially foregoing all rights to say that, hey, we give them an education, they're the same as every other student, because they're not. You're not treating them the same as every other student. You're forcing them essentially you're forcing their hand to choose to play. And if they don't play, you don't know how things could work out. Do they lose their scholarships? Do they lose their spot on the team? Do they lose a year of eligibility? How does this even work around? And how does this benefit the player in any aspect? Because there's no monetary benefit. We already knew that. So this is all just to make as much money as you possibly can in the worst predicament that we've ever seen in the last, 20-something years. Like, this is really, really, really bad for all aspects of sports, not just professional, but college too. As we see Stanford, they had to cut 11 sports programs. They had 36 before this, and they had to cut 11 of them after the 2020-2021 season. They are no longer going to have 11 sports programs, and they're not the biggest ones in the catalog, right? But the fact that they had to cut 11 just showcases what the environment is. And this is Stanford, right? And Stanford is known more for education than their athletics, but they had such a strive for excellence in everything they do attitude that they were winning awards for their overall sports participation for years. And they still might win it this year, but for them to cut 11 sports and they're that big, I'd have to imagine smaller schools are going to be doing similar moves, and it's not going to be pretty.
Yeah, it's definitely a process. It's definitely something that, the leagues have to all come together and figure out what's best. Obviously, we talked about last time we were together on the show about spring football. And obviously, I don't know if you heard, but the National Junior College Association is about to vote, they voted yesterday on Monday to put their season in the spring, which obviously I think they could do because obviously it's a smaller league. So there's not as much, ramifications on the line, where obviously a bigger league like FBS, obviously it's a little bit more complex. And honestly, this is a good first step, just because if you do all conference in terms of the actual conferences, it keeps a bubble, you could say, in a way. Like, think about it. Like, think about most SEC schools. Literally, we're going to be either in Florida, South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky. And then, obviously, the only teams that are kind of out there are like Missouri and Texas A&M. But outside of that, you're pretty much sticking to the places around you. ACC the same way. You're not taking that 2,000-mile road trip to the West Coast, like you said. Even though it was going to be a neutral site between Alabama and USC, imagine if they had said, we're going to do it at USC. Like, during this time, you want to have your players traveling all the way to a state that has a good number of coronavirus cases, and vice versa if you travel to have to play a team in Florida potentially. It's the same thing. And so all you can really do is just try to limit it as much as you possibly can in terms of things that they would be doing, going out, interacting, and having, all types of things that they usually would have to do during the season. Obviously, the student athlete, the college athlete, I'm sure it could be also a little bit lonely. Like, okay, obviously there's going to be people in these college towns, these areas that live there based on apartments and stuff like that. But in terms of on campus, if they decided to not bring them back, it's like, well, there's no one here. And you just have the students, the football players, the athletes just doing their same things. And then we don't even know when they get back how much restrictions are going to be put on them by the coaching staffs. You know what I'm saying? Like, before it was just like, hey, don't do anything that messes up your eligibility or messes up who you playing. Now it's like, listen, we might forbid you from going to parties. We might forbid you from going out after a certain time. We might need to monitor you at all times. So a lot of things could change. And so, like you said, a lot of these players are going through all this, and they're not even getting paid for any of this, And listen, yes, they are younger. If they got COVID, then obviously we can sit here and say they're not as much at risk. And so it's something that you could take a chance on. But why would you even want to put kids in that position in the first place? That's one of the biggest questions as well. So it's something that every conference, since the NCAA allows the group of Power Five to work as their own individual, like parts of the NCAA. And then, eventually NCAA sometimes comes up together on big decisions. We'll have to see what each conference decides to do, as obviously we've seen the Big Ten and Pac-12 already decide to do. SEC commissioner said he's a little worried. He's big concern. And we'll have to see what happens with the ACC and the Big 12 as well.
Exactly. But we're going to wrap up the show on that note. Brice, good job today, man. We've another one down, and we are going to continue on making some great content here. So thank you all for listening to the GSMC Football Podcast today. I'd encourage everyone to go review the podcast on whatever platform you choose to listen to us. 5 stars, 5 stars. Every bit helps. And another reminder to follow our social media, our Facebook and our Twitter at GSMC Football. All right. Hope you all have a great day. Continue to do great things. Stay safe out there. And we'll be back next week.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.